My name is Claire Patterson. I am the manager of the scientific and legal section at the Marijuana Regulatory Agency of Michigan. My background is actually in plant biology and plant pathology, formerly from research, though I do have experience in the cannabis industry on the other side prior to regulation. We kind of have this mashed together section of our scientists and our attorneys, and I oversee, of course, our team at the MRA, but specifically I oversee safety compliance facility, oversight, quality control, as well as the compliance process for all of our licensees here in Michigan. Given that I am a little bit more familiar with cannabis than some of my counterparts at the agency, I also provide a lot of scientific policy and specialist advice, and I oversee a good deal of special projects for the agency as well. The challenge with regulating cannabis is that we're all brand new to this, right? The history of regulating food or drugs, there's a long history there. There's a lot to feed off of. There's a lot of research available for regulators as well as the industry itself. So I think that the fact that the cannabis industry is brand new is really challenging. But I think it also is very interesting for the industry side of things as well as the regulators, because we have this opportunity to build a foundation that's really strong to push this industry forward in a way that both protects the public, health and safety, but also, builds this really strong foundation for something that could be incredibly successful in terms of business. Honestly, it's hard to say. Besides the lack of research and the lack of data, I think there are a lot of ideas out there about how regulation should be done or how the industry should be run. But without the evidence, without the research, it's really hard to put those things into practice. I think one of the best things about our licensees here in Michigan is a lot of them are doing research. And so that really helps inform us as regulators to be able to make informed policy decisions moving forward. So it's not required necessarily. There are a couple of research projects that are going on that people can participate in if they want to. Our licensees, currently there are a few folks that are working on this CBD to THC conversion process. There are some producers that are working on producing beverages, and those are what we would term more research projects. But research in and of itself is not a requirement to be a licensee. But I think that makes it all the more interesting that our licensees are actively doing research on their own accord just for the sake of science. I think it's a really beautiful thing, and I think that it sets Michigan up to really lead the industry in research and collecting this data for the nation at large. I would tell them to learn about cannabis first and foremost. I think something that Michigan did a really good job of very early on was realizing that they needed people who knew what they were talking about. They hired scientists, and then, I was the second scientist to come on board, and I came from the cannabis industry. And I'm still, 2 years into the MRA teaching folks about cannabis because the industry itself is evolving so rapidly, and there's so much new and upcoming information, new products, and it's important to stay on top of that. Beyond having folks that are well-informed scientifically and well-informed in cannabis, reach out to other states who've done it before. Ask them what their pitfalls have been. Ask them if they have advice and heed that advice. When we started, we reached out to other states, and we have folks reach out to us all the time. And I think the more that we can communicate openly about the challenges that we face, the better we can make regulation as a whole. Generally speaking, they don't receive formal training. I am the resident cannabis nerd by association, so I put together presentations. We do Cannabis 101, Cannabis 102. So I think the last time I did that, we have manager presentations at our monthly meetings, and when I present, I'm presenting about cannabis. So, our field staff gets training in cannabis. That's just something that we've kind of implemented as part of our process. And I think it's been really helpful. At least that's the feedback I've heard, that it's been helpful. I hope that it's helping my team because, a lot of them come from a place where cannabis is kind of a no-no subject. A lot of them are from law enforcement and they just don't have the education and experience that they might have if they were exposed to cannabis on the other side. So I think it's really helped open doors and open their eyes to what is out there, but also to help them make informed decisions when they're on site and actually working with licensees. I think the biggest concern that I hear from our licensees is that our rules are confusing. And I absolutely understand that. You look at a set of administrative rules and it's all legal jargon. It's hard to read. It's not easy to digest. It's difficult to implement in day-to-day practice. So that's the biggest thing that folks really struggle with. And if I could give advice to any of our licensees, it's to not get frustrated when you're reading the rules. You want to read them and read them again, and preferably have an attorney that will read them for you, of course, but that may not be accessible to everyone in the same capacity. So don't give up, keep reading the rules, keep trying to make sense of them, and really understanding what that means for your business on the day-to-day, not just a broad, boring rule set that you have to force yourself to read. And then for the regulators, I think that the biggest challenge is getting people educated about cannabis. We've talked about that before. Folks just don't understand cannabis, and we're all brand new to it. I think that regulators on a whole have not been largely informed about what cannabis is, the effects, all the different product types, how the processes work. So I think that's one thing that Michigan really has as an advantage is we have that education, and we have folks that can provide that education to our staff here in Michigan. I think broadly that plays a role. Not everyone is open to the idea of cannabis being legal here in Michigan. And you have to respect that. Those are people's opinions, and that may be how they were raised, right? But I think, at least in my experience with our regulatory body, folks are pretty supportive of this. I think it's been a really good thing for Michigan. And I think that our licensees are doing a really good job at operating in this industry, even though it's brand new. Michigan takes a very educational approach to regulation. When we first started, we were in this what we called an education-based moment, I guess, for lack of a better term. And we've really been focused on trying to assist licensees in getting into compliance, right? Because these folks were operating on their own, without regulation for so long. And then this regulatory body comes in, we have all these brand new rules, and it was challenging for people to get up and running in a compliant way. So I think that Michigan has done a really good job at attempting to close those gaps and really find a way to increase communication between the regulators and the licensees. We have a lot of work groups that involve our licensees, which is incredibly important to informing our policy decisions. And I think that has been very, very helpful for both sides of the industry. The one work group that I'm head of is our scientific advisory work group that has members from the MRA, from MDARD, from MDHHS. We have a representative from LSSU, and then we have folks from the industry. And it's incredibly helpful to have their insight and opinion on the issues that they face on the day-to-day. Given that the industry is so new, it makes sense that it moves very quickly, right? Everyone is trying to get their products to market as quickly as possible. They have a great idea and they want to get it out there and share it with the world. I think that it can be challenging as regulators to keep up with all of these new product types, but we have to. There's just no way around it. So I think what Michigan does really really good at is having these open lines of communication between the regulators and the industry. So, we're always looking to improve our regulations. We're always looking to make decisions based on the science and the research that folks are doing. So I think that really helps us when we're creating regulations, and our goal collectively, not just the industry, not just the regulators, but as a whole unit, is to put public health and safety first. I mean, every licensee that we talk to agrees, yes, we need to implement these things intelligently. We need to take our time, make sure that they're safe for folks to use, and then really take a stepwise approach to bringing those items to market. Oh gosh, I wish I could say when that might happen. Michigan has been really fully operational since around 2018. I've been involved with our program since 2019, so about 2 years now. And the changes that I've seen since I began even have come in leaps and bounds. We always talk about how quickly things are moving. Nothing is the same as yesterday. And as much as we might like to think that we're going to hit some sort of a stopping point, I don't know that we're going to see that anytime soon. I think nationally speaking, we're starting to communicate more openly with other regulators. We're starting to kind of compare notes and say what's working for your state. Where are you seeing challenges in your state? So I think that sense of things, we might start to see some uniformity in expectations and regulations, but the industry itself, I don't know that we'll see that anytime soon. I imagine it's brand new. It's going to continue to grow. It's going to continue to evolve the next decade at least, I would imagine. Obviously, cannabis is unique in that all of these folks, our cultivators and our processors, were operating in a non-regulated space. So there was not a lot of familiarity with things like good manufacturing practices. And, they started coming to the table and they got their licenses, they're ready to produce these items, and they're starting to go to market. Thank goodness, we have testing in place to make sure that these products are safe and to make sure that there's some sort of a check in place before these products go to market for consumers. And I think that the testing laboratories provide such a critical role in the industry, especially, with the absence of things like good manufacturing practices official. Not to say that folks aren't doing that, but it's just not available for them in cannabis, given the nature of cannabis. So it produces this really interesting dynamic in the industry at large. Obviously, the testing laboratories they are essentially a gatekeeper to the consumer, and it's an incredibly important role. So I think in Michigan, we've started to see the labs kind of begin to come together and work to improve testing and safety because, like I said, at the end of the day, everyone's goal is to protect the public and to protect the consumer. And I think that the industry at large is starting to recognize how important that is as well. I think as the states continue to evolve, we will start to get on the same page for what is really important in testing and what is acceptable in testing as well. I think that the top 3 most important things that regulators can do when implementing a program for cannabis is education for both the licensees, helping them understand the regulatory framework with which they're operating in, as well as the folks that are working at the regulatory agency, and providing that education in a way that makes sense to people. Additionally, communication. We are not operating in a silo as regulators, and the licensees are not operating as a silo in and of themselves. So keeping those open lines of communication between the licensees and the regulators is incredibly important because we are all in this industry together, ultimately. Michigan, I think, is a little bit unique in that we have the marijuana regulatory agency. A lot of other states operate from, their Department of Health is, I think, the most common one, or some folks have their Department of Ag. But in Michigan, it's just us. We do obviously interact with other departments, other agencies. We operate with our Department of Health and our Department of Agriculture as well, but typically, there's not a lot of overlap. More recently, obviously, our Department of Ag oversees hemp, which has caused a little bit of just confusion in what is hemp versus what is marijuana. But I think beyond that overlap, there's really not a lot that we see in terms of interacting with other agencies at the state level. So anything that is quote unquote marijuana officially is up to the marijuana regulatory agency to deal with, which makes it incredibly simple and streamlined for us. Other states really do operate with their Department of Health or, their Department of Human Services, something like that typically. And we were kind of the lone island initially, which made it really challenging to get up and running because we didn't have a lot of interaction with our other agencies that had established programs. So everything that we've done here in Michigan has been brand new for us as well. And I think given the challenges of setting up a program like that and getting Michigan up and running in the cannabis space, we've been incredibly successful in a very short amount of time. We have a lot of communication now with other agencies. When we need to reach out and talk about pesticides, for instance, we'll reach out to MDARD. They're very, very communicative. But the fact that we have the oversight authority, full stop, is incredibly helpful to streamline processes. As regulators, we have to be cognizant of the fact that we are all working towards a shared goal. We all want the cannabis industry to be successful, and why wouldn't we? It's great for the economy, especially here in Michigan. We've seen that it's been very supportive. I think that regulators have to be open-minded and understand that they're working with folks that have been previously in an unregulated industry, and there's a level of mistrust there because of that. And it's our job as regulators to really open those doors of communication and build that trust with licensees and help them be successful within the framework that we've created.